Keep my freedom, I'll keep my guns. Try to keep my money and my religion too.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
I'm gonna keep my big VA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need, we know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas, and my guest today is Jack Foote. Jack is with the Arizona State Defense Force Foundation. That's www.azsdf.org. Hello, Jack. How are you?
Good morning, Clay. It's great to be on the radio with a Free American.
Great to have you back. Now, we've been running across each other for years, haven't we?
Well, I guess we go back a ways, but like my former commander used to say, you're only as good as your last performance review. So let's just dive right into it, and let's talk about what's going on right now, because it's too important to let it wait any longer.
All right.
Right now, the state of Arizona is trying to pass new legislation that would establish, fund, arm, and deploy a state defense force on our southern border. We've gotten to the point where this is now a cold reality. It is not theory, it is not fantasy, it is not fiction. This is happening right now in our state legislature. Here's the deal. Under the Title 32 of the United States Federal Code, each state is authorized to raise its own military forces. This was a modification to the 1983 National Defense Act. This is a Reagan-era law that came into being as a result of the National Guard becoming more heavily involved in federal missions. The state governors were not going to support that change until this modification was made to federal law that allowed the states to have state-only forces. The difference between state defense forces, as defined under Title 32, and National Guard are basically that National Guard complete two contracts. Those soldiers sign two contracts, one with the state, one with the feds. That's the mechanism by which they get activated and called to federal duty. State Defense Force soldiers do not complete that second contract, and under the federal law cannot be ordered to federal service. So you cannot take a state guard unit and deploy it overseas. In fact, according to the statutes, they cannot even be ordered outside of the boundaries of their own state. They can volunteer for it, but they cannot be forced. So what we're having right now is a debate in the state legislature as to whether or not make our state the 23rd state to establish a state-only defense force. 22 other states and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico have already exercised their rights under the Title 32 and have established state defense forces. Now, the name state defense forces is what is used in the federal statute. What each state or commonwealth actually calls them can vary. You may have heard of the New York Naval Militia, or the New Jersey Naval Militia, or the Maryland State Guard, or the New Mexico State Defense Force, or the Alaska State Guard. These are all examples of state defense forces regulated by the National Guard Bureau, but controlled and commanded by the governor and the adjutant general of each state. So,
Jack, let me just interrupt you for a second, because I've been accused by the ADL and Southern Poverty Law of starting the militias in New Mexico. They just don't tell you that I did it in the governor's office. We weren't a terrorist group. We were not trying to overthrow the governor. We worked for the governor, as far as in our minds, anyway. And that was Governor Gary Johnson, who is running for president, I believe, on an independent ticket right now.
Well, God bless you. And exercising the rights of the states under the federal code is exactly what we're proposing. That's exactly what has been introduced in the state legislature as a bill, SB 1083. If you go to our website at www.azsdf.org, you can follow a link directly to the website to the webpage on the legislative website, the state of Arizona website, that talks about the text of the bill, and there's a link to a summary and fact sheet. This is actually happening. This has been buried by the major news media. They are terrified to touch this story. They won't even mention this in the local news because they are so freaked out that we have caught them with their pantaloons down around their ankles, and we are using an existing law to get this problem solved. You have,
I think it's a good plan, because and you've got a lot of sheriffs out there. Richard Mack just put out a thing. He says it's a miracle. They tried to stop his funds on PayPal, but he had over 100 sheriffs meet there in Las Vegas.
Right.
And sheriffs here, Larry Deaver, I put on a little benefit for Larry Deaver here. Don't know how that turned out, because I mean the opposition came out. I said the vets need to support the sheriff, and the farmers need to support the vets. We need to all work together on this some way to secure what we've already got. We're not rebels, Jack. We're not trying to overthrow the government. We're trying to keep the government from being overthrown, aren't we?
Well, we're trying to keep our republic safe. And to do that, we have to secure our borders. And we cannot do that with a purely law enforcement approach. People disagree with me about this, but you cannot deny that what is going on our southern border has escalated gradually since the year 2000 to where it's no longer just criminal activity. This is military activity. This is an insurgency. These people are in uniform, they are armed, and they are operating as a modern military unit with command, control, and communications. There are observation posts operated by the cartel mercenaries inside of Arizona, as far north as 100 miles from the border. These are manned regularly. These are command and control points for guiding the drug loads around law enforcement. These guys operate observation posts on mountaintops all along our southern border. If you're not familiar with the terrain, it's very flat, and then all of a sudden there's a mountain. If you get up on top of that, you get a perfect bird's eye view for miles. And these cannot be dealt with by traditional law enforcement tactics and methodology. We need a military unit that can go toe-to-toe with the military units that are coming across our border. Someone just posted in the chat room that we need a crack team of special forces. I served in the United States Army as an infantry officer. I've worked with special forces, and I've worked with the Rangers, and I've trained with them, and I've trained with the 82nd Airborne. My first job in the military was as a light infantry rifle platoon leader. I understand land warfare. I understand what the special forces are for. They can help tremendously, but they cannot do it by themselves. We need Ranger-level forces in much larger numbers than the special forces can offer. What the special forces can do is they can come in and provide training to the state defense force soldiers. There may be federal statutes against that, but I think it can be worked around.
Let me bring up a couple of points here. In my book Mystery Babylon, I documented here and started blowing the whistle on the whole CIA Mossad drug dealing operation commanded by George Bush, a CIA director. He sent the special forces down to Colombia to build a series of radio guide towers. Those radio guide towers got brought in 100 planes into Albrook Air Force Base the cargo was cocaine. And I ended up running the whole document. And I ran the story in my motorcycle magazine. That's the first time I got threatened by the CIA. Now we've got a situation here where our own BATF, the same people responsible for murdering 100 people in Waco, the same people that were responsible for blowing up the Oklahoma City federal building and trying to blame it on militias, and they've been supplying weapons to the drug cartels. Now, are the drug cartels? Are they CIA, Mossad? According to Bill Cooper, they got all the CIA and the Mossad got their funding from dealing drugs. Now, if they're loading these Mexicans up with drugs to bring up here to sell in your neighborhood, and the government's behind most of this, the federal government, the only option we've got to defend ourselves from a corrupt federal government is our state governments. And this bill will do that, won't it?
In fact, it does that in such a way that it is beyond our wildest dreams to have heard a state senator stand up on the record and say, we want the state guard to have no federal funding and no federal fingers in the pie. That's the problem with the National Guard. They receive so much funding from the Federals. The Federals effectively control what they're allowed to do.
In my film, True Face of FEMA, I filmed Colonel John Brinkerhoff of FEMA lecturing law enforcement in Albuquerque, New Mexico at Sandia Labs. And he's talking about a war, a long war, and he's asked, he said, we're in case of a single outbreak of smallpox or a nuclear device or a natural disaster of significant proportions, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops on the street. And he said, they said, are you talking about the National Guard, Colonel? No, they're too expensive. Besides that, they're going to be over in Iraq or Afghanistan or someplace like that. So who the hell was he talking about? He tried to say what they needed was exactly what you're talking about, a state defense force. But the way he put it, I got the feeling that the feds would be trying to control it, that they didn't want the states.
Well, then we can thank the powers above, far above. We can thank the Lord that we have good men in our state legislature, like State Senator Al Melvin and State Senator Frank Antonori and State Senator Sylvia Allen, who have made it very, very clear that they would accept no federal funding whatsoever. This is all going to be funded purely from state funds, and not that much of it. I mean, you look at the expense. They actually asked the commander of the National Guard in the State Senate Border Security Committee meeting how much it would cost to deploy 500 National Guard soldiers as state forces, not as federals. How much would it cost to put 500 National Guardsmen on our border? He said $20 million. We are talking about funding a much larger force of volunteers, unpaid, that are paid for purely out of state funds and private donations for $1.5 million a year. For $1.5 million a year, we can build the second best funded state defense force in the country. The only one that would be getting more money for their state defense force would be Alaska, and that's because Alaska has a real-world mission to guard and secure the Alaskan pipeline. Well, we can see a lot more utility in guarding that southern border than guarding the pipeline. Well, we are going to get it done.
If the federal government, CIA, agencies of the federal government, BATF, are responsible for sending the drugs over here, I mean, and they're using the illegals as pack animals to bring it up, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I've actually seen that. The use of what we call mules is widespread. They pump these poor devils up on dope. They actually inject them with amphetamines to make them work harder and run faster with the heavy loads on their backs. But it's gotten a lot worse now than it was 10, 12 years ago. Now it's a military operation. Yeah, they still use the mules, but now they also have armed escorts operating as small units ahead of and behind the mule trains. We talked about the government supporting this.
Yes.
That was the model for many years. And it worked so well that now the federal government has competition. Guess who's competing for the dollars and the favors from the Mexican drug cartels? Now the federal government is being outbid by none other than Hezbollah. This is not speculation, this is documented fact. All of the articles that prove this are on our references page on our website at azsdf.org. You can go and watch the testimony to the state legislature. You can watch the video of the testimony to the Congress of the United States. This has been ignored by the major media, but the proof is there. Go to our website, look at the links, look at the testimony offered by Richard Valdemar in March of last year to the Arizona State Legislature. Go and watch the testimony by retired Lieutenant Colonel Joe, I forgot his last name, retired Lieutenant Colonel that went to our state legislature and testified about this very issue. Joseph Myers, that was his name. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Myers testified also in March of last year. You can go and watch the testimony from Zach Taylor, who is the representative of the National Association of Retired Border Patrol Officers. He has talked to our state legislature about this issue extensively, and he came out in front of cameras in the state legislature border security meeting 2 weeks ago, and he said, we need a state guard in Arizona. That is coming from the voice of the Border Patrol agents who are in the field, the ones who are not allowed to testify to our state representatives, the ones who are not allowed to talk to the media, the ones who are muzzled by the federals. Their voice is their union, and that's the retired Border Patrol officers. And those retired Border Patrol officers are the ones who talk to the agents in the field, and they are the ones who come out and say, look, this is what the agents really want. We want a state guard.
What about, now we passed a law here, it was voted on that we should allow the sheriffs to pick up the illegals. The federal government is suing the state of Arizona and really harassing the sheriffs like Arpaio and Larry Deaver and Paul Bebo.
Right. That's an issue of immigration control. As I said earlier, Clay, this isn't just simple criminal enterprise anymore. It's grown. It's morphed. It has evolved. This is now a full-blown armed insurgency. When it gets to the point where the cartels can force law enforcement to alter their operations, to operate only in certain areas, to get out of certain areas of our border, and they can change how they staff and how they operate, then it becomes an insurgency. That is from the textbook that I was trained with at the School of the Infantry at Fort Benning, Georgia. That's the military definition of an insurgency, when they start to alter the law enforcement tactics and methodologies and operations of the target country.
They have signs. They have signs up in Pinal County, which is one county up from the border, with Pima in between. Pinal County, they got signs up telling Americans not to go in there because there may be drug dealers in the area.
Yeah, those signs are actually kind of funny, because the federals say that the county sheriff doesn't have the authority to arrest someone for coming across the border illegally. But guess what those signs have on them? They have the 911 number. If you see suspicious activity, dial 911. Well, where do you suppose that rings? It rings at the county sheriff's office. So they are talking out of both sides of their mouth when they say that the county sheriff doesn't have the authority. They know that the county sheriff has the authority to deal with drug smuggling, to deal with drug possession, to deal with illegal possession of fully automatic weapons. They know that our state and county law enforcement have that authority. The problem is that law enforcement is no longer adequate to deal with the threat. This is a cross-border military insurgency.
The sheriffs know they need help. They know they need help, Jack. I mean, that's why we put this whole ride together, motorcycle ride, for Sheriff Deaver over there in Cochise County. Because we wanted to put boots on the ground to try to help, and we didn't know about this this legislation at the time.
Well, this is just a bill right now. All this does is change the playing field to the advantage of the people on the ground rather than the people in the ivory towers.
Well, we've got multiple problems here. One is of course the drugs that are coming up. Two, the illegals that are in this country are, according to all of the information and statistics I've got, are responsible for about 50,000 murders since 9/11. That and the majority of people on the wanted list and that were committed to murders were illegal aliens.
Well, that's very true. But the one statistic you haven't heard all last year, or you haven't heard this year, think about this, Clay. Remember a couple of years ago they kept talking about all those criminal aliens that were dying in the desert, and they kept pushing numbers at us. Why haven't we heard about that? I haven't heard about it in a year and a half. Nobody's talking about that anymore. And would you like to know why? Because no one has died in our desert trying to cross. No one. Now, why has the numbers dropped to zero and they're not talking about it? The reason that it's not being talked about is that the Obamaist regime came into power and changed the operating procedures at the ports of entry, the legal ports of entry. Now they have directed Customs and Border Protection to let in anybody that doesn't have a criminal background, anybody that they can't prove has a criminal background, anybody that isn't carrying anything that's illegal. If they're coming across and they say, I'm just coming across to go shopping for the day, they're supposed to let them in. That was an Obamaist change. That is why they're not dying in the desert. They're coming across in tourist buses, and then they're just disappearing into the interior within a matter of hours. They don't have to come across the border. The only ones coming across our border in Arizona now are the ones that are carrying the drugs. The only ones that are coming through the desert are the ones that are packing the fully automatic weapons. We are facing a full-blown cross-border military insurgency, and the Obamists are looking the other way.
Guess that's what happens when you try to deal with the illegal alien problem, and you're an illegal alien, you know.
No, we have to change our perceptions. We have to be able to improvise, adapt, and overcome in order to prevail on the battlefield. Part of that is changing our mindset. We cannot keep fighting the same war that we were fighting 10 years ago. 10 years ago, yes, it was about immigration. It's not anymore. It's not immigration when they're coming across my border carrying nuclear weapons, carrying weapons of mass destruction, carrying biological agents, and that is coming. That is where we are headed, and that is the testimony that you will see that was given to our state legislature by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Myers, by retired Los Angeles Police Detective Richard Valdemar, and by a host of others that have testified to our legislature and to the U.S. Congress. They know that this is coming. The only way that it's going to be stopped is with military troops, and that's what the State Guard is all about. I don't have to make this stuff up, Clay.
No.
It's all there in writing. Just go look at it on our website.
And we'll have links for all of that on there. It's what is, you know, I think part of our problem, Jack, is television, because they're not talking about this on TV. If you're watching CNN, you're watching NBC, you know, you might have been able to see the Super Bowl, and Madonna looked pretty good for an old lady, but you're not getting any information. They're not talking about this bill on television, are they? And they want to put people like me that are trying to bring this information to people. They're trying to demonize me, call me a racist, call me an anti-Semite, call me anti-government. And
I'll tell you what, Clay. Here's how we deal with that. We're not going to call them names, but we are going to call them. That's why I'm on your show today. I'm asking everybody who hears this broadcast and listening to us on the internet, or is participating in the chat room, or hears about this from somebody else, everybody. It doesn't matter if you live here in Arizona. you still need to contact our elected legislators in the House of Representatives and in the State Senate. These are the guys who are debating this bill right now, and they're going to hear from all of the opposition from all over the country, not just from inside of Arizona. Since they're going to hear the opposition, they need to hear the support too. We need everybody to go to our website, follow that link to the page that lists the phone number, fax number, and email address of every elected state rep in our country, or in our state. Every state rep, every state House of Representatives member, every state senator, they need to hear from all of you that you support SB 1083, because otherwise this is never going to pass. We need to get the voices to start yelling from the mountaintops. Pass this bill. This bill has already gotten through one committee in our state Senate. It has to go through 2 more committees in the state Senate. It has to go through the full House, or excuse me, the full floor vote on the Senate floor. Then it has to go through the House of Representatives, and the whole process repeats again. 3 committees and then a floor vote. Then it has to go to our governor. Now, she signed a somewhat lesser effective bill last year that increased her executive power to establish the state guard, but then she didn't use it. So now we want to pass this legislation that doesn't say just that the executive has the power to do it. They want to add the legislative authority to do it and establish it and get it started and get them to start training. We have a lot of work to do. From the day that the governor signs that bill, if she signs it, it's going to be 5 years of hard training to get a state guard unit up to the point where it could deploy to our border. We may not have that much time left, but we have to start training now. So get those people informed, and let's get them calling, faxing, and emailing our elected state representatives while you and I are still on this show. This needs to happen not next week, not tomorrow, not later today. It needs to happen right darn now. Everybody who can hear this, go to our website, look up those phone numbers, start phoning in today. Start doing it while we're still on the air. Folks, we are never going to have a better opportunity than this legislative session this year, 2012, the 100th anniversary of the statehood of Arizona. Let's give our state something to celebrate.
Now, you say this is already in some states. Texas
22.
is one of them, isn't it?
22 other states. Now, here's another interesting little factoid. This is perfectly legal. This has existed since 1983. Of the 4 southern border states, Arizona is the only one that does not have an established state defense force. California has one, New Mexico has one, and Texas has the largest one in the country. They have several thousand state guard soldiers. I know a couple of them because I used to live in Texas. They are very serious about what they do. So if anybody's going to come out and say that they oppose this because they think the crazy militia people or the racists are in charge of it, look around. These forces have been in existence since prior to 1983. We had state defense forces going all the way back to World War I. And they were sanctioned by the federal government. Why is it that 22 other states, that all 3 of the other 4 border states can have a state defense force? Why can't Arizona have one? That's why they're not talking about it in the major news media. That's why they're terrified of bringing it up, because they don't know that they don't have any way to counter the proposal. They cannot say that it's bad for Arizona when it was good for all these other states for so many years.
All right, let's see. Let me do this. My guest is Jack Foote, and the website is AZSDF. That's Arizona State Defense Force.org, and you need to go there. That'll give you the links. That'll give you the phone numbers. That'll give you everything, and pass this show around. Tell people about it. You know, this is